Hello, my name is the 10th Path, and today I will be covering a battle between the Toad Sage Jiraiya and the tailless tailed beast Kisame. So, without further ado, let's begin. Firstly, I will cover their statistics and compare the two. We'll begin with strength. In terms of strength, Kisame seems to have the edge here, based on all his feats. Kisame is known to have superhuman strength. And in terms of statements, I'm not sure there are many characters who have this sort of portrayal with their strength. Um, I think Mike Guy has the same portrayal. Tsunade obviously has the same portrayal, the Raikage. But Jiraiya doesn't really have the same portrayal of superhuman strength, even superhuman compared to superhuman ninja. So superhuman compared to superhumans. Jiraiya doesn't really have that portrayal, especially in base form. He doesn't really perform any strength feats, whereas Kisame is able to hold down Asuma with the tip of Samehada, which is pretty impressive because in part 1, Asuma was stated to be comparable to Kakashi. And we know this is mainly because he's Kakashi's superior in close armed combat, because of Kakashi's superiority in other areas like ninjutsu and genjutsu. So this feat is pretty good for Kisame. Jiraiya doesn't even have a feat comparable to this in terms of close armed combat. Um, you might be able to say, well, he's comparable to Orochimaru, who's comparable to Hiruzen, who's the strongest of all the five Kage. But even then, it's not like Hiruzen's the strongest because of his close armed combat. I'd actually say Hiruzen is probably superior to Jiraiya in that regard. And I also don't think that old Hiruzen is actually retaining that strength, which is superior to all five Kage. I think that statement is more so about his prime reputation. But because the Shinobi world they didn't know about Hiruzen's decline, I mean, even Orochimaru was surprised at how weakened Hiruzen was in his olden age. So yeah, I don't really think you can use this to say that Jirai is even superior to Asuma in close arm combat. Um, so if part one Kisame has the edge, then part two Kisame undoubtedly has the superior strength. Um, this is because Kisame grows a lot stronger over the time skip, whereas Jiraiya I don't think grows strong because he seems to be in his prime in part one, right? I assume he didn't attain Sage mode over the time skip. He's mainly gathering intel. He's not really training. Whereas Kisame is going through a lot of battles. He's absorbing a lot of chakra over the time skip, it seems. So yeah, it makes sense as to why Kisame grew a lot stronger over the time skip, whereas Jiraiya would stay more stagnant. And Jiraiya has a lot of good strength feats in part 2 as well. Um, and yeah, I don't think base Jiraiya has anything really to suggest he's as strong as Kisame. I think it's pretty clear, and I think most people would agree that base Kisame is stronger than base Jiraiya. Right? I don't think that's controversial. Where it does get controversial though is when Jiraiya attains Sage mode, where he gets drastically stronger to the point where he performs some ridiculous strength feats, like he's able to ragdoll this pain summoning that is able to give Gamaken some trouble. And we know that Gamaken is comparable in strength to the other giant toads like Gamabunta. And Gamabunta has a good showing of strength against Shukaku, who's a Biju, by the way. So we know that these toads are very strong. Gambunta also has a very good showing against um, Kurama when he was dropped onto Kurama's head by Minato. Although this is mainly Gambunta's weight more so than his strength, but it's still a pretty good feat. And Kisame in part 2 has a good um, array of strength feats, but it's hard to compare Kisame's strength feats to Sage Jiraiya's because Sage Jiraiya shows greater strength than the giant toads, whereas Kisame is fighting against Might Guy and Killer Bee, and he's doing pretty well. But would I say that base Killer Bee is stronger than Gamabunta? Um, would I say base Might Guy is stronger than Gamabunta? It's probably debatable. I mean, base B in the War Arc does have a pretty good feat against the 4th Raikage A where he manages to overpower his lariat. And we know that the fourth Raikage can literally roll with Biju. And we know for a fact that the Biju are superior to the giant toads in strength. I mean, Gonbunta was in awe at even a weakened Shukaku strength, let alone true power Shukaku. And then we know that a true power Shukaku was almost able to one-shot Gonbunta with a single air bullet. So yeah, there's a pretty big gap between Biju in their true, like, prime states versus the giant toads in strength and in ninjutsu. And we know that the fourth Raikage can brawl with these Biju. He was able to give Gyuki a permanent injury by severing his horn. So the fourth Raikage explicitly scales in strength to Biju and is able to give them permanent injuries. Yet base B was able to overpower him. I know that some people will say that base B got stronger in the war arc as opposed to his fight with Kisame in the Five Kage Summit arc. And they use the statement of B saying fighting makes you stronger than training. But if you were to apply this logic to B, you would also have to apply this to Kisame. And that would just mean that they both get stronger from the Five Kage Summit arc, right? So Kisame on Turtle Island would just be stronger than when he fought B in the Five Kage Summit as well, and B would also be stronger. So they both got stronger in that case. So you can't really say that B got stronger than Kisame when they both got stronger, in my opinion. So yeah, I would say that Kisame would still scale to this feat of strength from base B, especially in his fusion state. Like, if you don't think base Kisame scales to this base B, then fused Kisame definitely would, right? So even if I were to agree that Sage Jiraiya is stronger than base Kisame in terms of strength, I would say that fused Kisame is stronger than Sage Jiraiya in terms of strength, and I feel like that's pretty fair. So yeah, generally speaking, I would say in terms of close combat and in terms of taijutsu and in terms of physical strength, Kisame would have to take it, in my opinion. But if you disagree, feel free to give me your reasons as to why you think Sage Jiraiya or base Jiraiya is physically superior to base Kisame and fused Kisame. So now we'll move on to speed. And in terms of speed, I don't think speed is too relevant with these two because neither of them are speedsters, but both of them have the feats to be able to react to speedsters. For Jiraiya, especially in Sage mode, he's able to react to and fight the Paths of Pain in Taijutsu. And we know that the Paths of Pain can react to Sage Naruto, on par with him even, as the Preda Path shows when it goes to punch Naruto. Now Naruto uses Frog-Kata to defeat it. But the point is that Sage Naruto is pretty comparable to KCM 1 Naruto. We see this in the fight between KCM Naruto and the third Raikage, where KCM 1 Naruto is shown pretty relative to the third Raikage, and Sage Naruto also shows relativity to the third Raikage, so it doesn't really seem like there's a big speed difference or a big speed gap between Sage Naruto and KCM 1 Naruto. Other people have said this before, and I definitely agree. I think that the speed gap between KCM 1 Naruto and Sage Naruto is very overrated and pretty negligible. If anything, Sage Naruto would be better in close combat because of his greater reaction speed as a result of his Frog-Kata sensing. And we know that Jiraiya scales to this level of speed, being able to fight 3 Paths of Pain and being able to react to their attacks. And he seems to be a bit faster than the Paths of Pain at the very least. Although the Paths of Pain have no issue reacting to him, but he seems to be like physically faster than them, which shows that he has pretty good speed, especially with his frog feet and hands, where he can amplify his grip on the surface and move insanely quick. So scaling Sage Jiraiya to these KCM light levels of speed, I think is pretty fair. I don't think he's as fast as KCM Naruto, especially KCM Naruto's full speed, which seems comparable to at least Jonin Minato, maybe just Minato in general, depending on how you argue about it. But yeah, KCM 1 Naruto's way faster than Sage Jiraiya. But Sage Jiraiya is like on this tier of speed, just on the lower end. And Kisame similarly has pretty good speed feats against speedsters like B and Might Guy. He's able to react to cloaked versions of B, he's able to counter version 1B, he's able to physically react to version 2B, although he's not quick enough to dodge out of the way. Um, he's also able to react to 6th and 7th gate Guy, which is pretty crazy, honestly. So this is why I don't really think speed matters too much, because Kisame can react to characters on this KCM 1 tier level of speed as well, and he can do pretty well against them. And the nature of Kisame's arsenal makes speed pretty irrelevant unless Kisame wants to fight you in close quarter combat, because the amount of water he can create makes it so that the fight is going to be like ninjutsu based. It's going to be on his domain, and he's going to be able to swim underneath into the body of water he creates. So, generally speaking, I don't think speed is too important. Like I keep saying, speed isn't too important. I think they're both relative. I don't think they'll have any issues reacting to each other. Except in cases where Jiraiya attempts to use a feint, like he used a frog as a feint to attack the animal path, or I think it was the human path from the rear. So if he uses something like that against Kisame, he might be able to land a pull on Kisame without Kisame being able to react properly to it. But other than cases like that, I don't think one is going to be outspeeding the other. So now we will move on to durability. And in terms of durability, I don't think anyone will disagree that Kisame has the much better feats. I mean, even Jiraiya in Sage mode has some pretty bad anti-feats with his durability, where he's able to get pierced pretty easily by Renegon rods. The Ashura path is able to blow his arm off, even though he warned Jiraiya beforehand. Well, not warned Jiraiya, but pretty much gave him an indication that he would be attacking him from the behind. So there's no argument that Jiraiya couldn't have amplified his durability enough. But even with that, his arm was still blown off by the Ashura path. And Sage Jiraiya doesn't really have many other durability feats of note. Base Jiraiya similarly doesn't really have any durability feats. I mean, the only durability feats he has aren't really too impressive when comparing to Kisame's durability feats. For one, he's able to tank like a kick from Might Guy and only get a nosebleed from it. But at the same time, it's explicitly stated in the data books that Might Guy, when he realized that he was actually aiming his kick to Jiraiya, he weakened the kick on purpose. And yeah, the kick that Jiraiya was using was dynamic entry, which is a D rank technique of guys. Whereas he uses a B rank kick on Kisame, and Kisame just eats the kick without taking any damage whatsoever. So even Part 1 Kisame compared to Jiraiya has superior durability. And I think this fits in nicely with Kisame's theme as being a superhuman among superhumans in terms of his strength. So it only makes sense that this would also apply to his durability as well. And I don't even think I need to name any other durability feats from Kisame to show that he's superior to Jiraiya in this regard in just every way. I mean, firstly, he's able to tank Hirodora from 7th Gate Guy without dying, right? I mean, just surviving it is pretty insanely impressive. But he's able to do this without Samehada as well. I mean, no, Samehada is a massive amplification to his durability, which he used to block the Lariat from version 2B. Right, and also surviving version 2B's Lariat is also pretty good, and probably better than anything Jiraiya has. So, I don't think I need to keep going on. Kisame obviously has better durability. And generally speaking, I would say he comes out on top in terms of statistics. Generally speaking, he's stronger, he has similar speed to Jiraiya, and he's a lot more durable. But now we will get into the meat of the video, which will be comparing their abilities and seeing how they can deal with each other's abilities, and considering some scenarios in which Jiraiya might prevail and Kisame might prevail. And I do think this fight is very close, because both combatants have great techniques and great opportunities of defeating the other, and I will be covering that next. Now, in terms of abilities, no one will disagree that Jiraiya has more abilities than Kisame, making him more versatile. Yet no one will disagree that Kisame's scale of ninjutsu far surpasses Jiraiya's. So, can Kisame's power overcome Jiraiya's versatility? Jiraiya has many options of attack. He has Rasengan, he has Lion's Mane, and Harijizo, two techniques which manipulate his hair, turning them very sharp, defending him against all attacks. He can manipulate the earth to create giant bogs capable of engulfing giant summons. Jiraiya has a plethora of techniques, and he can also summon other characters to support him, like Gamabunta, Gamaken, even Gamakichi if he really wanted to. Shima and Fukasaku, the two great sage toads. Jiraiya has a very wide arsenal. So, what could Jiraiya do to Kisame with his arsenal? To begin, Jiraiya could try to contain Kisame with his lion's mane, which he did against Conan and against the animal pack of pain. I don't think this would be too effective against Kisame, um, because of Kisame's superior strength to base Jiraiya, and also the fact that he has Samehada. So he might be able to fend off Jiraiya's lion's mane and avoid it. He can also just substitute himself with a water clone. We've seen Kisame do this against Itachi in the Generations cutscene. So he might just be able to trick Jiraiya into grabbing one of his clones. Or Kisame could just parry Lion's Mane off with Samehada. I think these are two fine options. Or maybe he could try to block it with a water ninjutsu or something of the like. Just generally speaking, I don't think this ninjutsu would be too effective against Kisame. I don't think this would be the be-all, end-all of the battle or anything like that. And on that note, I don't think Harijizo, the defensive hair technique of Jiraiya, would be effective at all. I mean, Harijizo's defenses haven't really been tested all too well. All we know is that the hair stands out like steel weapons, essentially, like metal weapons. But we know that Kisame should have the strength to just plow through any sort of metal weapon like defense. So again, these hair techniques wouldn't be too useful. And Samehada might even be able to absorb the chakra within the hair on prolonged contact. Samehada can't just absorb the hair like it does a chakra cloak, but if it attaches onto the hair, it would be able to suck out the chakra within the hair and make the techniques ineffective. Another technique Jiraiya could use to help him here is his oil bomb, which he used on Conan to stop her movements and then restrict her with his lion's mane. I don't think this would be effective either because of Samehada. I mean, Samehada can block the oil technique and he can just consume the oil because the oil is made out of chakra and Samehada just eats chakra, even chakra which is transformed into different natures. We've seen it do it on multiple occasions. So these starting techniques for Jiraiya wouldn't work too well. I also don't think his flame bombs would do any good, mainly because Kisame has the elemental advantage in that regard. So just a single shock bomb would be enough to defeat Jiraiya's flame bombs. But obviously, this isn't all that Jiraiya has in his arsenal. He also has Rasengan. He can try to engulf Kisame in a mud bog. He can also just summon others to help him out against Kisame. So, what can he do here exactly? Well, he could attempt to land a Rasengan on Kisame, sorry. But this would be difficult because of Samehada. Again, like I'm going to be saying this a lot, but Samehada is a really big deal when it comes to nullifying ninjutsu. Like not a lot of techniques will work on Samehada or Kisame just by virtue of that chakra absorption. And I don't think Rasengan is any different. I don't think it would be effective. I don't think it would even land on Kisame. And even if it did, Kisame has survived worse, like a lot worse than like a base Rasengan, right? If it was like a Sage Rasengan, then maybe it would be different. But we're just talking about base Jiraiya for now. Um, Jiraiya can also create like bogs to slow people down and essentially just submerge them into it. But we know that Kisami's are pretty good at Earth release. Like he can just dig himself under the ground, um, and he could also just flood the bog with his own water, so he doesn't get submerged into it. Which I think would be a good counter because Kisame's scale of ninjutsu is beyond even Jiraiya's scale of the bog. So I do think he could flood the bog, and this would just give him more water to use against Jiraiya. What about Gamabunta? Um, like I mentioned before, Kisame's strength should be superior to Gamabunta's, and Jiraiya's strength doesn't even get to Gamabunta's level or exceed his level until he gets into Sage Mode, which Jiraiya would not initially do to Kisame like he did against Pain. I mean, the only reason why Jiraiya went Sage Mode straight away against Pain is because he knew that Pain had the Renegon, or rather, he just saw the Renegon and was like, we can't play around here, we have to go full power. But against Kisame, I mean, he's encountered Kisame before. He doesn't seem too threatened by Kisame. Of course, I would say Kisame was weaker back then and is a lot stronger now. But would Jiraiya know that? Maybe, maybe not. The point is, he's not going to be going into Sage Mode straight away. And I'm just looking at his options in base mode to see whether they would be effective or not. And so far, they don't seem too effective against Kisame. So I would say Jiraiya would realize he needs Sage Mode. But back to Gamabunta, I mean, Kisame should be stronger than Gamabunta. Kisame should also be fast enough to dodge Gamabunta. I mean, we see in the Pain arc that the Paths of Pain are pretty easily able to avoid Gamabunta's sword strikes. Um, Kisame should be able to counter Gamabunta's ninjutsu with his own. He can create thousands of shocks. He can even use the water shock bomb, the great water shock bomb, to absorb Gamabunta's ninjutsu and send it back to Gamabunta. I mean, this would be game over here for Gamabunta, and he would just desummon as soon as he's hit with the shock bombs. So, generally speaking, base Jiraiya, in my opinion, stands no chance against Kisame. So, base Jiraiya would realize he has to go into Sage Mode to defeat Kisame. I will say that there is one option for base Jiraiya, depending on the location. He could restrain Kisame within the Toad mouth bind like he did in part 1. And it didn't seem like Kisame had any way of getting out of it in part 1. So that might be one way for base Jiraiya to win. Although, like I said before, I think Kisame gets a lot stronger in part 2. So it's debatable whether he would be restricted by this like he was in part 1. And ultimately, we don't actually know if Kisame can get out of it or not. But it is a possible win condition for Jiraiya, depending on the location. Although I would slightly disagree. I'm just bringing it up as a possibility. So Jiraiya realizes he has to go into Sage Mode, and let's just say he does get into Sage Mode. Now let's look at Kisame's arsenal and whether Kisame can pose a threat or whether he has something in his arsenal that Jiraiya can't deal with. So Kisame's arsenal is pretty simple. He's a master of water style techniques, but he has a few water style techniques which are his own unique creations, it seems. So at the basics, he can create water clones. He can use the hidden mist. Um, he can like create shark bombs out of water, and he can create massive amounts of water, which he can use to manipulate to fight his opponent. These are his like basic techniques. He can also use Earth style, and according to the database, he's proficient in pretty much all elements except I think lightning. So if push came to shove, maybe he would use fire release, maybe he would use wind release. Although he's never used these ninjutsu or nature transformations in canon because he doesn't need to, and also because he specializes in water release. So these basic ninjutsu aren't really going to be effective against Jiraiya. I mean, the regular shock bomb is going to be good for Kisame's for Jiraiya's fire release. Kisame would be able to counter Jiraiya's fire release with these basic techniques. Kisame would be able to counter Jiraiya's clone usage with his own water clone usage. And there's also the water prison. which I think would be a good win condition for Kisame if he's able to trap Jiraiya inside it. Um, I don't think Jiraiya would be able to break out of it with pure strength, but at the same time, it's a tall order to think, or it would be a tall order for Kisame to actually catch him in the water prison. I think that would be very unlikely, but it would be a win condition. Um, the water that Kisame would create would be great for Kisame's movement in the battlefield. If he's ever feeling like he's overwhelmed, he can just submerge himself. And as a shark, he would be superior to Jiraiya underwater for sure. Um, Even without fusing, I have confidence he would be better than Jiraiya underwater. Um, but yeah, the main techniques or the main reasons or the main ways he could win is through Samehada's chakra absorption. The longer this fight lasts, the stronger Kisame will get and the weaker Jiraiya will get. That's just what will happen fundamentally. Like the only way this trait of Kisame's wouldn't work is if you're so much stronger than Kisame that he doesn't have the chance to absorb your chakra or get stronger over time. But I don't really think Jiraiya is like multiple tiers above Kisame. I think they're pretty similar in tier. So this gimmick of Kisame's I do think would work pretty well. And I'd say this is a very good win condition for Kisame because all he would have to do is just draw out the fight until Jiraiya gets weakened. And he's just sufficiently much stronger than Jiraiya to overpower him and then win. Right? So would be Kisame's main way of beating Jiraiya, and I think this would be very effective. I don't think Jiraiya would have much for this. I also don't think Jiraiya has anything for the super water shark bomb. I don't think he has anything to counter this. I mean, another win condition for Kisame would be for Jiraiya to launch at Kisame with his massive Rasengan, right? And Kisame would just counter that with his super water shark bomb, and Jiraiya would just get eviscerated by it after it absorbs his Rasengan. So this is another good win condition for Kisame. And the last win condition for Kisame would be the water prison shark dance. If he's able to catch Jiraiya in there, I don't think Jiraiya could do much to win in that situation, especially if Kisame combines that ninjutsu with like 1,000 sharks or the super water shark bomb. In that situation, Jiraiya's kind of done, right? Now, I do know that some people have argued that Kisame can't use the water prison with other techniques, or Kisame can't use the water prison until he absorbs a sufficient amount of chakra from his opponent. But honestly, this is complete nonsense, right? This is completely baseless, and I don't see any reason to believe this. So these are Kisame's 3 win conditions. And now I'll move on to Sage Jiraiya's abilities and how they would fare against Kisame. And then I'll give you a conclusion as to who I think is the ultimate winner. And please give me your thoughts in the comments below. If you disagree with me, please tell me if you agree with me. But let's get into Sage Jiraiya. Of course, Sage Mode is a massive boost to Jiraiya's powers, strength, and abilities. For starters, he can use a massive Rasengan as opposed to his usual normal size Rasengan, which is stated to be able to carve mountains in the databook. He can use different sort of combination attacks with his summoning animals, Fukasaku and Shima, who are 2 great sage toads who are centuries old, who have great battle experience, and so on. Jiraiya can also shoot off his hair in this form at very high speeds, stated to be the fastest in Sage Mode. But Jiraiya's main technique, and I think his best win condition against Kisame, which is also a good counter to Kisame's drawn-out battle tactics of absorbing chakra and getting more powerful over time, is Frog Song. Now, to be frank, Kisame has no way of defeating Frog Song if he is caught in it. If he is caught in it, it's game over and Jiraiya wins. All Jiraiya needs to do is just decapitate Kisame and that's game over. Kisame's done if he gets caught, basically. On the other hand, there are some external conditions which might make it difficult for Jiraiya to land Frog Song. Firstly, in neutral battle conditions and in a neutral location, it might be difficult for Jiraiya to retreat in order to use Frog Song. I mean, in canon against the Three Paths of Pain, Jiraiya retreated in order to set up the Frog Song. And this relied on the Paths of Pain to come in and then fall into his traps and preparations. If Jiraiya doesn't have these preparations, then it becomes more difficult because he would have to stall Kisame himself until Ma and Pa are done with their Frog Song, which would mean that Ma and Pa cannot help him anymore. And against Kisame, this might be difficult, especially if Kisame is using the water prison. I mean, there's the question of if they can even use Frog Song effectively in the water prison, because they would be singing underwater. But there's also the options that Kisame has in the water prison, like creating hundreds of sharks, or using the Super Shark Bomb, or just outspeeding Jiraiya, grabbing onto him, and absorbing his nature energy. So it would be difficult depending on the situation, but like I said, this is Jiraiya's best way of beating Kisame, and it's not as plausible as people might think. Generally speaking, I don't think Sage Jiraiya has too much to defeat Kisame here. I mean, as I mentioned before, even the massive Rasengan can be countered by the Super Water Shark Bomb, and assuming he does land it, let's assume Jiraiya can land it. Kisame might just survive based on his chakra absorption. I mean, he did survive version 2 Lariat from B, which probably has a lot more chakra than Jiraiya's massive Rasengan. So it's plausible Kisame could survive even if it did land, rather than getting engulfed by the Super Water Shark Bomb. And also, Kisame's Water Dome, I don't think Jiraiya has too many ways of defeating it. I mean, I do think he can get out of it, potentially, by reverse summoning. But if he does reverse summon, this would basically be Jiraiya fleeing the battlefield. Similar to how Sasuke fled the battlefield against Deidara and required Suigetsu to summon him back. So I generally don't think Jiraiya has too many options here. I mean, perhaps a theoretical technique like a giant toad oil bomb in combination with Gamabunta as well. Like, we see this massive flamethrower he uses against Manda, and I don't know if this is bigger than the Water Dome, but it might be able to do something to it. I mean, if you think of this and Sage enhance it and add 2 other Sages to it, it probably would grow bigger than the Water Dome. But would it be able to, like, destroy it? I'm not sure. I don't think so, personally. But yeah, I don't think Sage Jiraiya has too many options beyond Frog Song. Anything that he can do can really just be blocked or dodged or absorbed, and he's just going to be feeding Kisame over time. Oh, and I forgot to mention one thing. Jiraiya does have a God Toad summoning, which is a summoning that has an alternate dimension within its stomach. It can engulf people and send them to this dimension, so it's basically battlefield removal. And this is another good win condition for Jiraiya against Kisame. So his 2 main win conditions are Frog Song and the Gore Toad, I would say. But other than that, he doesn't have too many win conditions, and he would find it very, very difficult to deal with Kisame's Water Dome. I generally don't think he can do much within the Water Dome. So I would have to give the victory to Kisame if the Water Dome came out. And overall, I do think Kisame does edge Jiraiya out. In conclusion, I do think so. I do think that it would be a very tough battle. But in the end, Kisame would have to come out on top, in my opinion. So that's it for the video. This is my first video, so please forgive me for any editing or any audio mistakes. And if you disagree, please put a comment down below. If you agree, please put a comment down below. And if you like this content, please subscribe to the channel, like, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.